Hello, everyone. Welcome to Insecurity, your go to podcast for navigating the ever evolving topography of cybersecurity, GRC, technology, and beyond. I'm your host, Pukar Hamal, the founder and CEO of SecurityPal. In each episode, we delve deep into the hottest topics with executives and leaders from information security, GRC, revenue, as well as other critical functions within organizations responsible for keeping us safe and secure. Join us as we uncover insights, strategies, and stories that shape the defense front lines and technology. Joining us on today's episode of Insecurity is Chris Cruz, Chief Information Officer of Public Security at Tanium. And today we're going to be discussing the critical relationship between CIOs and CISOs and why it's key in having a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy. Really excited for the conversation here, Chris. Before we jump into it, welcome to the show. And could you share a little bit about your background and how you ended up becoming CIO at Tanium?
Well, it's great to be here, Walker. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about that. I am the Chief Information Officer for Tanium Public Sector, which includes all of our government facets and organizations. I'm fortunate enough to travel globally throughout the world, talking about best practices, lessons learned, and being a thought influencer. So a little bit about me. I spent 30 plus years in government. I was 16 of those years as Chief Information Officer level, C-level executive. I reported to three different governors along the way in my journey. I was the CIO at California Department of Food and Agriculture. I've been the CIO at California Department of Healthcare Services. I stood up the first benefits exchange here in California, known as Covered California. So very proud of that achievement. I've been the Deputy State CIO for California for over 4 years and was able to address cybersecurity policy, effectuate policy change, stand up a security operations center, and really align IT with the needs of the business to make sure that application security was baked into all of our technological capabilities and initiatives here in California. So great to be here. I spent my last couple of years in a county, San Joaquin County, California, building that county framework, aligning IT, coming up with a strategic vision and plan for the county and bringing people together. So it was a constituent based capability, and being a good civil servant has been a passion of mine. And I'm taking those best practices and lessons learned that I applied in those leadership positions in government and applying it here at Tanium, working with our customers. So great to be here to talk about this important subject today.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, it's always great to have a public servant on the call, and appreciate you for all the service that you've done here in the great state of California. Um, One question I'm super fascinated by, because the journey from public sector to private, it's not always easy. There's a lot of challenges to that. How have you been able to make the transition? And what's been the most challenging or surprising part of it?
Again, an excellent question. And I think there's always challenge when people make the transition from public to private. And, is my experience, is the thought leadership and the abilities that I got and the success I had in government, is that going to translate and scale to private sector? And quite frankly, I think that comes up a lot with officials like me or state government people that make the transition is, do I have the capability to do that? And I will tell you that I think those skills, whether they be soft skills or hard skills, the experience of working in the vendor community previously, directing billion-dollar organizations and managing thousands of people, those skills do translate. And I always said that life is about public-private partnerships, and the ability to be able to work with the vendor community to lay out a comprehensive and excellent plan to make government more successful is the same thing I'm doing today. So the answer is, I think once the transition happened, it was relatively seamless to go in and influence, be a thought leader, a subject matter expert in my field to be able to work with government customers. And what we found is that government customers tend to listen to other government customers, and people that have sat in that chair, so to speak, had those issues, those opportunities, those crises and problems, and how did you solve those? So we tend to have more credibility and integrity when we approach and solve problems using the specific tools that we have. And so the transition has been pretty successful for me to come in and be able to do that, be that thought influencer, the subject matter expert to say, hey, here's what I did in that particular situation. These are the best practices and lessons learned that I delivered in that organization to build this type of collaborative partnership. And I think it's been a really good transition for me. I love what I do, and I think there's more space for transitions to happen folks like me from the public sector to private with these types of skill sets and knowledge and experience.
I'm sure that the context of you working in all those governments and all the various administrations that you worked with, I'm sure that it is the type of experience that Tanium obviously tremendously values, as well as your other customers and other governments that want to apply those best practices. So I think that's certainly tremendous like value add. I wanted to dive deeper into this question that we were talking about in the lead up to this conversation, which is really um, the uh, uh, the critical relationship, perhaps even more critical today, between CIOs and CISOs. I think the best conversation, the best question, really that I could start with right now. Why do you think this has become such an important question now and today?
Yeah, and this question came up many years ago in government about the relationship with the CISO and the CIO. Obviously, CISO has responsibility for information security, but there's so many boundaries and parallels here between the two positions. It's critical that those two parties work together. And here's what I found in government and why I believe, in my mind, that CISO should report to CIOs. And obviously, people have different levels of opinion on this, but mine is that we need to keep one set of books in an organization. And security, information security needs to be baked into everything that you do on the technology and operational level. So it's important that you have what I call co-opetition with your CISO to make sure that the tools that you're buying, the planning and procedures that you're aligning with, all have a standardized platform and format to effectuate policy change. And the only way I believe you're going to do that if those parties work together and have a direct relationship. And that served me well in state government. So as opposed to the CISO buying their own set of tools, having their own policy, and the CIO and CTO doing their own on the operations side, I wanted to bring that partnership together. I wanted to form a common security governance structure so we all had a seat at the table to make decisions and buy one set of tools, have one set of standards, and one area that we can identify a common platform. Because the more that you can standardize your technology tool stack, with the vector that we have today, the better off you're going to be in managing and decreasing risk. And that was a partnership and opportunity that I saw that said, this relationship works better when we have this direct relationship. We have the same budget, we have the same tools, we can perform and ensure that we have the same types of automation and not have manually duplicit processes. And so those were the things I wanted to build into my organization to have that necessary partnership and then go back to the business with a partnership opportunity, not being divisive in terms of how we do things. And I know other, CISOs may have a differing opinion of that, but as a CIO, I felt like that relationship mattered to me. When I was in state government in California, we had an assembly bill here that basically said that all CISOs need to report to CIOs and the executive branch underneath the governor. It was 2408, Assembly Bill 2408. And so today, that's mandated here in California. But I also hear that there's situations where CISOs want their independence and way away from the CIO and want to report directly maybe to the CRO, the chief revenue officer, or the deputy director of admin. But there better be tight levels and tight levels of governance and a structure in place that they're addressing to make that happen. Because if not, you get a sort of a singular approach, and then now you have you decrease your standards and you increase your security risk. And I never wanted to do that. And partnerships are very important, public-private partnerships, and that's why I'm so passionate about the CIO and CISO. How can I say this? On the same page of the same book, managing and aligning their particular communities of interest with the best interests of their organization. And when I was able to do that as a CIO and managed in government, I found that we were very successful in putting a comprehensive cybersecurity framework in place that aligned back with the IT strategic plan. So you would see that there was connecting the dots around what we did in a level of standardization because we were making decisions together. And what that results in is a return on investment, decreasing the amount of tool sprawl that happens in your organization, and having a level of management with resources able to manage on what I call a standardized type platform.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point. It does feel like having multiple books, as you like to call it, sort of multiple systems of record or multiple tool sets, multiple approaches and processes. There is a tremendous amount of risk introduced with that, because you can't stay on top of, you can't fight a war on multiple
No,
fronts, right? So this is certainly
absolutely.
a big challenge that a lot of organizations are facing. We talked to a lot of CISOs, and a lot of CISOs are deeply concerned, especially nowadays with just the increasing exposure of the role to liability. I'm sure you're familiar with some of the things that have happened with the SEC and charges that have been filed against different leaders at organizations. I'm trying to sort of understand from your perspective as well. How do we sort of allay those concerns of CISOs, in that they feel like they don't have control over a lot of that, but then they're held to account. How do we get around that sort of like fundamental problem?
Well, I think, it goes back to that partnership capability that I talked about, and having a comprehensive governance structure in your organization, starting with your C-level executives, your CIO and CISO at the same table, and having a degree of accountability and responsibility with some set of authority. So we're all in this together. And I think that'll alleviate some of the concerns that the CISOs have, that they're out on an island, that they can't get things done because they have accountability and responsibility with various levels of no authority. And what that does is make everybody accountable to the bottom line, and make it an investment in how we manage and prevent the necessary risks and issues from happening in our organization. You can't bring and put CISOs out on an island and have plausible deniability. And so many organizations do that. So I feel for what those CISOs are going through, but you've got to have an engaged CIO, engaged C-level executive series, to have a partnership and understand how you're going to manage these certain issues when they come up. What are you going to do? Are you going to transfer? You're going to delegate them? So everybody has a management and responsibility for the level of risk and criticalities of impacts that happen within an organization. It's got to be a collective partnership. And if it's not, these types of situations are going to continue to hang up, where the CISO gets blamed, where he or she didn't have ultimate responsibility or authority to carry out and engage with some of the preventative based measures that could have prevented some of these cyber attacks and breaches.
Yeah, and it's top of mind for everybody, right? I think the new vectors of threats, not only are there more than ever before, but they're more potent than ever before, right? There's less ways to mitigate it. AI is on everyone's mind right now. Like, what are some of the risks and threats that sort of keep your organization up at night, and that you're sort of talking about in your circles?
Yeah, I think, the risks are twofold. You talked about the proliferation of AI. You talked about, the digital economy and digital equity and what goes into that. And there's a lot of great people that can build open source code from scratch. But my concern is they don't bake security into the application layer. They're not consulting with their CISO on policies and procedures of, what it takes for fundamental good IT hygiene. And these are concerns that we have, that we're building things, we're getting out ahead of ourselves, and we're not adequately testing those particular environments and the capabilities of what the impacts are. And the bad guys aren't waiting. They're sitting around and they're looking for every unlocked door into the building. And all it takes is one unlocked door. And so I don't think we realize the magnitude that we are completely dependent today on automation. We make data driven decisions, we rely on data through automation. So people want that data, they want to steal that data, and it's worth a lot of money on the black market. And sometimes I think we're too crisis management driven than really having a proactive managed environment to say, how can we address these needs up front, as we look at AI, as we look at machine learning and this new attack vector? Because everybody works from home now. We work in a virtual environment. So a few years ago, when I was managing before COVID hit, we could manage within the four walls of the building within our network. Now our network extends God knows how far. And it could be Starbucks or McDonald's or wherever that is, and how do they authenticate? We better know as an organization where we're authenticating at and tracking our IP address through these many areas that we're working from. Because if we're not, how do we know that some type of keylog attack doesn't happen, or a ransomware attack gets attached to our URL? And guess what? They're stealing the keys into our major critical systems, and they have access without us even knowing about it. So I always say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's very important to have visibility, management, and control across your entire organization's ecosystem. I know that's easier said than done, but you have to have tools that give you that necessary visibility today. The stakes are way too high. The cyber hackers don't care. They're indiscriminate in terms of the size and complexity of organizations. And they're out there key logging thousands of organizations every day to get into that one unlocked door. And that's the series of consequences we have today with AI, with areas concerning privacy and areas along that nature. Is the more we automate, the more we build those apps, how much validation and verification is built into that. So Chris Cruz, they know that Chris Cruz is authenticated and has credentials to certain systems. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations don't know that, and that's a huge risk. And so mitigating those risks is putting a lock on all of those doors, making sure you have visibility management and control, and you have a degree of automation within those controls to do so. And that means patching. That includes vulnerability management, asset and software management reclamation, understanding everything that's plugged into your network, whether it be centralized or federated. You got to have a common footprint, and I always say a standardized security platform to ensure and manage those risks.
Yeah, I mean that's it sounds like a lot of work, and it quite frankly is, right? We're in an environment where budgets are shrinking and priorities are being reconsidered, right? How can we help CIOs and CISOs make the case within leadership to boards about the importance of all of these challenges and the complexities of all of these challenges? How do we demonstrate this need up the chain? Have you found any success in that and sort of helping either your customers or Tanium itself?
Yeah, in fact, it happened when I was a county CIO. My first 2 weeks on the job, there was an issue at one of our hospitals in the region, and the hospital administrator stood up and I was talking about this issue or incident or data breach, and they asked him, "Well, who was responsible for this?" And he said, "Well, Chris Cruz is responsible." In a board meeting, putting me on notice without ever talking to me. So I used that crisis as an opportunity to say, okay, well, if I'm ultimately responsible for breaches in this county, at the hospital, at the sheriff's department, or everywhere else, I need the necessary authority to go along with that to secure the entire attack sector of this county. And that I need to buy the tools and I need to be able to commission all this and be ultimately have responsibility, authority, and accountability. And you guys need to provide that for me. So I always say never let a good crisis go undone, but making the effective business case to your board. And I got a seat at the table. So the CIO and CISO had a seat at the table at the board where they listened to us as their change champions and influencers on how we were going to fix certain things in the county. And so having that type, I always say never let a good crisis go undone. That's what I did. I used that as an opportunity to influence, get into the board to say, here's our degree of threat and risk and how comfortable you are with medium and high risk. If you're comfortable with it, then you need to deal with the ramifications that may come with a breach or incident. If you're not, and we want to have a low risk organization that protects and immunes our citizens' data, then here's the preventative based measures and tools that we need to implement. And I need to be able to, what gets measured, I need to be able to see what gets managed. And so changing that dialogue of taking a seat at the table along with your board, with your CISO, to influence those types of business cases is going to allow you to get more money to address needs and priorities in your organizations to manage risk.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and you know, well, I'd love to continue the conversation, and it's incredible all the advice and the takeaways and the insights that we've had in the short amount of time here. Before we end, I always like to sort of ask this question of leaders like yourself with decades of experience. Is there anyone or a group of folks in your life career who have had just a massive positive impact, a positive inflection point for where you are today?
I think I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of mentors in my life and people in leadership positions that said, hey, you better measure twice and cut once, and that you better manage risk and be a proactive planner because comprehensive planning leads to success. And I think that those were key ingredients, if you will, in shaping my leadership style and direction to be able to pay it forward and provide that necessary feedback. As I'd like to say, that type of information and background experience is priceless. You can't put a dollar sign on it. And those are things I've never forgotten in terms of how I lead an organization. But the most important thing I think I got in terms of wisdom is you got to bring people on this journey with you. And you got to bring people in and you got to make sure that you're building consensus in the issues or opportunities you're trying to take and make it look like, again, the appearance of and a strong of bring everybody with you. Don't leave people behind and build that consensus and get decisions. You can always make decisions by driving them in the right way that you wish to go, but bring them on the journey with you, and you'd be amazed. And I've been very fortunate in my life of having a lot of success because people bought into the vision. I set expectations, and I powered them to achieve those particular objectives, and that's been very successful. And I still think that those are the key ingredients to being successful with any leader, is working across the lines and partnering as well with the business.
Yeah, that's amazing. And not everybody has that philosophy, but I can sense a little bit of that sort of public service and bringing everybody with you type of mentality. That's serving, I'm sure, Tanium very well as your customers. Really, thank you so much for the conversation, Chris. And if people want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
Well, you can always reach out to me through Tanium. I'm at, Chris.Cruz at Tanium.com. I'd be happy to talk to people. I'm on LinkedIn, and, I chime in a lot. I friend people. And like I said, I always say, reach out, touch a hand, make a friend if you can. The more knowledge and information that we share together, the better off are we off in combating cyber issues, risks, is dealing with those best practices and lessons learned. So I think community-based sharing of information is very important, and I'm willing to do that with anybody that wants to talk to me about those lessons learned, my experiences as well, and to me, I never stop learning as well. So it's a reciprocal process. But thank you so
Yeah,
much.
that's great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All right. Cheers now.
Yeah, cheers.